Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. This is amazing what's going on in this country. Even the loudest voices of opposition are coming to the table, politically speaking. MSNBC's Morning Joe hosts Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, very much known for the relentless criticism of President-elect Donald Trump, met with him at Mar-a-Lago for the first time in 7 years. And I'm thinking, I guess he's no longer Hitler, right? It was good, though, that they did. And I'm very, very appreciative that they did this. They discussed a whole lot of, very important topics like immigration, media relations, other issues, and various issues that Trump has supported and they have opposed. But acknowledging that nearly 80 million Americans chose to return Donald Trump to the White House, a decisive victory, by the way, flipping these battleground states. Mika and Joe, to their credit, defended their decision to many of their own viewers who were very upset that the media would dare speak to the president-elect. But Mika and Joe said, listen, there is now the necessity of dialogue in this very deeply divided nation. And it's very telling when even his, staunchest critics recognize the importance of engaging with a leader who has captured the confidence of so many Americans. And perhaps this is a sign that it's time to move beyond political warfare and start working together for the country's future. Somebody who knows a lot about this is the host of the Crisis Files podcast. Roshini Rajkumar is back with me on the program. Roshini, it's so nice to see you. I couldn't think of anybody better to talk about this than you when we're discussing what to do after what transpired a couple weeks ago. Nice to
Well,
have you.
thanks so much, Tom. And it's so great to be back with you. I mean, here's the thing. I really applaud Mika and Joe for doing this just as you do. And what I also like and want to remind journalists out there, you and I are talk show hosts, but journalists out there, sometimes you need to have meetings that are off the record for background. And so the very fact that they were able to go and meet with him in a space that's his home, his comfort zone, and get information, have exchanges. And then if they want to share how that conversation went, which they did, but there are also nuances of it that will also always be between Donald Trump, Joe, and Mika. And I think that that is also the beauty of just getting to know some of the people we cover. Also, for me, as a former television journalist, it is amazing how much more accessible leaders and candidates are now. So the very fact that the two of them, and yes, they're very high profile, but the two of them could go and sit inside a former president, now president-elect's house and chat with him. I mean, that's also amazing. Was not happening when I started my reporting career in Fargo or even in my last TV market, Detroit.
Yeah, I didn't know you were in Fargo, by the way. I have a friend who lives there. He was in, I think, the NBC affiliate in Fargo, the evening news anchor there. But, listen, they do deserve some credit here, and I give them that. And I think Donald Trump does as well, because he's fully aware of what they've said about him. But to that point, the things that they have said, Morning Joe and Mika, I mean, they are among those who've called Trump a direct threat to democracy. But now they're engaging him as the future president. Let's move past the division, is what they're saying. But do you think it's at all appropriate that maybe they should start this off with an acknowledgement that maybe Trump isn't the Hitler that they said he was, that they just hated him, and that's why they said those things? I mean, I think an acknowledgement like that, is that appropriate, or should you just move past it altogether?
Well, it's appropriate only if it's authentic and natural to them. Look, back in 2015-16, we're now reminded that they were both saying what a good chance of winning Donald Trump had. And they were getting criticized for that. And guess what? They were right. So now, since then, they've said some more negative things. Hopefully, when they were in the privacy of Mar-a-Lago, they were able to maybe apologize or say whatever they were going to say about those Hitler comments. But I don't know that we need to keep on bringing those back up into the national narrative. So I would like to see hosts like that, most hosts, and specifically journalists, so not opinion hosts, but journalists, try to start over from the beginning, which is the new line that will happen once President Trump is inaugurated next year. And now, as he's President-elect Trump, let's try to cover him, both all of us hosts out there, but especially the journalists, as the president-elect. And one of my tips for doing that, Tom, which I'd love to say right here on your show, is journalists need to stop using adjectives. So whenever
Absolutely.
they say a name, like now every time you see RFK Jr., it's the anti-vax. Why can't he just be the, HHS nominee by Trump, Robert F. Jr.? I mean, these adjectives are killing us as a country, and journalists have such a power with their words, with their pen, with their screens, if they would just stop using adjectives.
Yeah, we used to all follow what was called the AP style book, but even the Associated Press are using these adjectives, which you're not supposed to do as journalists. We all learned that years ago, but they slowly creeped in. And when it's somebody you really dislike, those adjectives kept popping up, and they were inaccurate adjectives as well. So I hope that happens, and I hope that is the sentiment here. And I know there's a lot of pushback to Mika and Joe's from their viewership and other, staunch Democratic supporters who are very upset that they would dare meet with the president-elect, the former president, now the future president. What do you make of that? Do you think that that's going to simmer down a bit as time progresses and maybe people go into their disillusionment of what they've been told about this guy for the past, 8 years?
So there are a couple quotes that really stood out for me by each of them. From Mika, when she said, let's start talking, not talking about Donald Trump, but talking with Donald Trump. And that's the whole point. Get direct quotes from the people you are covering or having opinions about. When you can get their direct quotes after talking with them or with their legitimate spokespeople, that's really more a service to the voters and to the American public and to the world for that matter. The other is Joe saying, we're not here to defend or normalize Donald Trump. And that's never the role of anyone in media, whether you are a journalist that's supposed to be covering facts or talk show hosts like you and I, Tom, who are, sharing some facts, analyzing facts, and giving our opinion. We are not here to normalize anyone. I'm not going to insult someone else's intelligence by telling you I'm trying to help you understand person X over here. I'm going to tell you what I think about them, how I feel the optics are, what their strategy could be or couldn't be. That is my opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth. Maybe it will help you discern what you're thinking, and maybe it will help you understand some of the facts better. So I really appreciated some of the soul searching that it seemed, at least portrayed by MSNBC, that Joe and Mika did. And now I hope MSNBC can move on and just cover the forthcoming Trump presidency.
But see, I don't think they will. And here's why. Because I think it's great that he says he's right. He's not there to defend or normalize Trump, but he's also not there to attack him and make him seem abnormal, which is what they've done for so many years. And that's why I think they've got to at least acknowledge we haven't been acting as journalists. And they're not real. Mika is a journalist. I mean, she was with CBS News for many, many years. Joe
But she
never
was a
was.
journalist. For sure
Yeah.
she was. She knows what she did was not journalistic.
Yes, and I think that needs to be acknowledged to some degree at some level because I look at this meeting and I actually give Donald Trump more credit than Joe and Mika. I do give them credit, but I don't think they've come out of this thoroughly yet. I think they're still holding on to this. But what I did appreciate what they said on the air regarding this meeting that Donald Trump, reportedly was very cheerful and very gracious. He was a good host when they came in. But what they said was that, listen, we don't agree with most things that Donald Trump stands for. But we came to this meeting with a willingness to disagree agreeably. Like, that's okay. That should be normalized. Not what we've seen over the past many years, that if you disagree with somebody, suddenly that individual is a threat to all of Americans somehow. That's what I hope comes out of this. Not that Joe and Mika like Trump or vice versa, but they're willing to say, listen, we disagree vehemently on certain issues, but that doesn't mean this person is Hitler. Do you think we're going to get to that place in a country? And how would you recommend, as a strategist and a communications strategist, how we do that in totality as a nation?
Well, what you're making the case for is civil discourse. And there was a time when that was more valued and actually put into action in our country. So if every leader could have civil discourse with their own stakeholders and their constituents, and then that gets reported and visuals of that happening, quotes like that continue to then be or start being reported, then we can return more to civil discourse. What's happened is it's so anti-civil. It became kind of a little bit of anarchy when it comes to how hosts and some journalists were conducting themselves on the airwaves or in print. And so who I believe Tom needs to take ownership of this is the media as a whole, and the media that refused to really see what a lot of American people saw. For example, I recently saw a quote on, I believe it was the X platform Instagram, from Katie Couric, who said, Kamala Harris did a disservice to her candidacy because she never could answer a direct question. Well, I don't remember Katie Couric saying that before Election Day. But here we are post-Election Day, waiting for the inauguration of Donald Trump, and this is coming out from a past high-profile journalist. Her voice and her platform would have been better used ahead of Election Day. So now let's kind of just start where we are and not rehash everything. And what that means is go back to good journalistic standards, cover the people you're covering, stop using adjectives and adverbs, and stop making the news about yourself. I mean, here we are now. Mika and Joe are part of the news cycle, but they're using their platforms, in my opinion, in a good way, because they're actually reporting on this personal conversation they had with Trump. And maybe it will help some of their followers get some sanity.
Hey, I want to talk about this because yesterday you had a really big day, and I know you're the Crisis Files podcast. You're on this initiative. Can you talk about what you're doing right now, what happened yesterday, and the importance of good crisis communications and what you're doing to help?
Thanks for asking, Tom. So the Crisis Files is in season 3. People can find it on all podcast platforms, thecrisisfiles.com also, and YouTube. And we really dig into some of the hot topics of our time, whether it's AI or data breaches, health issues. The episode last week was about the vagus nerve and when it's off in your body, how bad your body is. So on Monday at Mall of America in the Twin Cities, which is one of the world's biggest entertainment centers, we had our very first live event. It's a milestone moment for our podcast that could, in that we recorded 5 episodes there. We were guests of our partner, Mall of America, and it was so much fun. We were broadcasting right internally across Mall of America. We're on their PA system. Those episodes will drop in December, but guests could come. Past guests came and celebrated with us. Current guests came to record, and all of the people in the mall could come and watch. So it was really fun. And one of the episodes that I got into with 2 of my guests who happened to be from my crisis squad, Steve Silton is the attorney on the crisis squad, and Jen Hellman is our PR guru. We talked about predictions for 2025. It's an episode that will drop at the end of the year called Hot Takes. And one of my predictions is that we are going to have an interesting reflection or new look at how important or not important celebrity endorsements are. And I launched with that prediction by sharing Betty White gets her own stamp next year. A lot of people would say she's an icon, she's amazing, she deserves it. There aren't that many people in our entertainment landscape, in the Hollywood landscape, that I'd say deserve a stamp anymore. So what is that influence of Hollywood going to be on America? It looked like it did not help Kamala Harris in this last election. So that was one of my predictions. And I'm looking forward to 2025 to see if it comes true or how that evolves.
What an amazing day to broadcast live in the Mall of America and have people within the mall come and watch your show, and you're going through the PA system there. Fun time, and it's a great congratulations on 2 full years of the Crisis Files. I remember when it started. It's a fantastic program. People should check it out. Roshini Rajkumar, the Crisis Files podcast. Roshini, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Take care. We'll talk again soon. Yeah, I'll say this because I still have, and forgive me if you're not understanding why I feel this way, but I still have a lot of skepticism about the idea that Mika and Joe suddenly are coming around. I do think they handled it the way they should have. I don't think they had much of a choice. They had to meet with the president-elect Donald Trump because he won so convincingly. And if they're ever going to have access to him, they got to understand it's okay to disagree. You don't have to go there and say, we love you now. But to meet with them and to hash through some issues together is what they should have been doing for the past 8 years anyway, and they haven't been doing that. I would have liked to see them acknowledge, and same with Katie Turek, because Rashini Rajkumar brought her name up as well. Notice it wasn't until, as she mentioned, it wasn't until after the election that Katie Turek finally comes out and says that, yeah, Kamala Harris did everyone a disservice because she never really answered the questions. Well, she wasn't doing that her entire campaign. And it seemed to me and a lot of others that the media was kind of engaging in this protective cover-up of Kamala Harris so that she would win. But now they have to state the obvious. She ran a horrible campaign, and primarily because she was incredibly non-transparent. And she was pretending she was going to do things that she is opposed to doing. And I think that's where the journalism industry, again, massively failed in this election. But thankfully, more Americans are waking up to these journalists right now, prior to the election, are just all in on it. It's like they're bought and paid for. But I do hope, as Rashini touched on, that now they're waking up, because the American people have been disillusioned by them. And hopefully they change and they go back to what journalism used to be. And you don't use adjectives, because when you use adjectives as a journalist, you're planting something in someone else's mind about how they should think about the individual or the topic that you're reporting on, supposedly objectively. The old AP style book was great. The new one, not so much. Hopefully it goes back and reverts. But Donald Trump's, I think, he's the one here that gets a lot of the credit. His willingness to meet with severe critics, and he's always had that open door, despite what you've heard from people like, Morning Joe and Mika Brzezinski. And they were saying that if he wins, he's going to attack his political opponents. It's just the opposite, as you're seeing right now. So the unexpected meeting with the critics, President-elect Donald Trump, he did sit down with the Morning Joe host. I'm going to give you kind of a recap of what they did. Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. And they were, among people like Rachel Maddow, some of his most vocal media adversaries, showing his willingness, Donald Trump's, to engage directly with even his, just people that hated his guts. At least that's what they were portraying on MSNBC. But what he's doing here is something rarely seen among, the Democratic leaders, who often avoid dissenting voices. Like, they will not come on a conservative program because they don't want to engage with conservatives. In fact, they threaten you, if you don't change your tune, I will never come on your program. And I've seen that many now election cycles occur, and I hope that now changes. The discussion between Mika and Joe and Donald Trump covered a lot of, heavy-hitting issues, like abortion. Of course, Mika and Joe fully in support of abortion. Donald Trump not. They talked about mass deportation, which Mika and Joe are against. They don't want to deport the illegal immigrants who have come across by the potentially tens of millions in the past 3 years. And they talked about media relations as well. So hopefully they bridge that gap. That was kind of, I think, the ultimate purpose. Hey, let's kind of fix some relationship problems we're having here. It's kind of like a counseling session for them. So Joe and Mika, they admitted they didn't agree with Trump on much, but he listened and engaged, which is a stark contrast to the cancel culture approach often favored by Democratic figures. And it all comes down to Donald Trump's convincing re-election victory, Donald Trump's decisive win, including flipping the battleground states and securing the first Republican popular vote victory in 20 years. And it highlighted his ability to connect with voters on issues that truly matter, issues that were often dismissed by the political elite and the media elite. And it was a nice, rare moment of dialogue. Despite the years of the public feuding, Mika framed the meeting as a chance to have an honest conversation. Finally, Mika and Joe want to be honest. And they emphasize that, 5 years of political warfare, they have divided the country now in a way that only dialogue can begin to repair. They were part of the division. And that's the thing I really wish they would acknowledge. They're the ones that were reiterating and perpetuating this divisive dialogue throughout the country that has been tearing our country apart and mischaracterizing someone they hate. So, yeah, hopefully they can bridge the divide here. Donald Trump's approach in the meeting was described as cheerful and open-minded. He's willing to listen. And he appeared genuinely interested in finding areas of common ground, even with his opponents. And that showcases leadership. It really does. That prioritizes results over these political grudges. And if you go back to Donald Trump's history, that is always how he has operated. He's welcomed people back into the fold, even when he has defeated them. And if they're willing to meet, he'll open the door. Come on in, let's talk. And it's a real, I think, criticism. There's been some criticism from the left on this, which is typical. While Donald Trump opens the door to dialogue, Democratic leaders often dismiss engagement with those who challenge their policies, leaving little room for compromising or understanding. And the meeting, I think, serves as a reminder that leadership includes listening to opposing viewpoints, something that Joe Biden hasn't done, something that Kamala Harris has not done. You can go down the list of current Democratic leaders in office right now who will not use this tactic to sit down and engage in dissenting dialogue in order to maybe just show some respect and a willingness to listen. Joe and Mika, their admission that despite their criticisms, they recognize that nearly 80 million Americans were not swayed by their media narratives about things like January 6th or election denialism, because they can see the flip side about all the violence by the other side and all the election denialism by the other side that has occurred over the years. Only in 2020 did it suddenly matter to Joe and Mika. So instead, they prioritize Trump's policy goals over their political controversies. And Trump was unconventionally very diplomatic in this. It wasn't the first time that Trump extended an olive branch to critics. His track record alone shows he's got a willingness to engage with opponents, whether in the media, whether in politics, whether global diplomacy. Something his detractors conveniently overlook. And you can go back to 2016, when a lot of people were calling on Hillary Clinton to be locked up and to be thrown in jail for the crimes that she did commit. Even the FBI acknowledged that these were crimes, these are criminal wrongdoings, but the only reason why the FBI was not going to recommend charges here is because maybe she didn't mean it. And we don't think the Democratic Attorney General is going to bring charges up anyway, so we're not going to waste our time. But yeah, these were crimes that Hillary Clinton committed. All that being said, Donald Trump had every ability to try to throw her in prison, but he said, no, this is going to divide the country. And instead, what Hillary and the other ones did, they tried to lock him up while he was president. So anyway, there's a dramatic difference and a contrast between these two parties, and hopefully that stuff goes away. And this is a good sign that it just might. All right, I want to remind you, we'd love to hear from you. You can chime in here, you can comment, you can ask me some questions if you would like in the comment sections. I'll get to those in just a moment. Also, the best way you can help us here, Tom Jordan Live, subscribe to our podcasts wherever you listen or watch them. Click the notification bell and watch or listen to them, and then share them. That's tremendous. We had some people share our podcast yesterday, and thousands of people engaged. That alone will help us and keep us going here at Tom Jordan Live. So thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. All right, I want to get to some headlines here. Matt Gaetz, you know him. He's going through a controversial confirmation process here. The former Congressman Gaetz is personally now lobbying Senate Republicans to secure his confirmation as Attorney General in the President-elect Donald Trump's administration. Within hours of his nomination, Gaetz hit the phones, reaching out to members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, including some unlikely allies like, Senator Markwayne Mullin, with whom he has publicly clashed during especially the ouster of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. But they're calling this Gaetz's charm offensive, and it signals a strategic pivot for Matt Gaetz as he faces fierce opposition. He needs these people that he kind of opposed in other, contentious battles as he was a member of the House. Yeah, he's a bit of a firebrand lawmaker, as if you've noticed. And he's under the shadow of a House Ethics Committee right now, this investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct, claims that he denies and has for a long time. And he's also got to contend with a reputation for divisive rhetoric that left many Republicans pretty wary about him. So he's going after them. But remember, his rhetoric had a lot to do with these budget deficits and budget debt that were never being attended to by the Republicans. So, yeah, it was divisive, but it was purposely so. And a lot of people supported him in that rhetoric because very few had the courage to go against his own party when his own party wasn't dealing with the glaring problems at hand, like a massive budget deficit and a growing massive American debt. So the stakes for Matt Gaetz couldn't be higher right now. A slim GOP majority. Of course, every Republican vote is going to be critical to get him confirmed. I think in the end he will be, but we'll find out. There's some Judiciary Committee members like Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He described Gaetz's outreach as cordial, and Kennedy assuring him of a fair shake. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina acknowledged that the necessity of Gaetz's efforts, noting it would be malpractice not to call every single Republican. That's what he's got to do, at the very least. And his confirmation could mark a sharp turn in DOJ leadership. This is why I support him in this role, because his style, and it's fiery, yes, ensures the path to confirmation will be anything but smooth. But if you want somebody in there who is truly going to get rid of political lawfare, this is one of the few guys that can do it. So for Senate Republicans, the question remains, can Gaetz mend enough fences to deliver for Donald Trump and really to deliver for our country? And I hope it is. And I hope that a lot of senators who may have had their feelings hurt from maybe some personal attacks from Matt Gaetz against them, that they rectify those things. Maybe he apologizes for saying some things, and they move forward for the betterment of the country. All right, let's go to the Pennsylvania Senate. This is amazing, this Pennsylvania Senate race. Look how close it is. And so the election chaos there in the Senate race between Bob Casey and Dave McCormick, it is so incredibly tight. Bob Casey acting like a kindergartner here. And there's a lot of accusation that he's taking in, ineligible votes to kind of go over the top here. So the chaos is really brewing as some of the Democratic officials in 4 counties there in Pennsylvania are openly defying the state Supreme Court's ruling on mail-in ballots as jeopardizing faith in the system. And despite the court's clear decision to disqualify ballots with missing or incorrect dates, it bucks the county election officials, Bucks County election officials are going ahead anyway. They're counting these ballots that they're not allowed to. And Democratic Commissioner Diane Ellis Marsaglia, she admits she is knowingly breaking the law. She admits it flat out, but she says it's necessary to force the higher courts to intervene. Oh, they will if you keep breaking the law. And maybe there'll be some higher consequences for you as well, because you clearly have the intent to break the law here. Meantime, Republican Senate candidate David McCormick, he's leading the incumbent Senator Bob Casey by 21,000 votes. He's already declared victory. A lot of outlets have already called the race for him. Yet Bob Casey, he refuses to concede this. And the GOP has launched a legal blitz, and they've dispatched hundreds of lawyers to ensure only valid votes are being counted in this. And you got the RNC co-chair, Michael Wadley, promising, and he means this, an aggressive, comprehensive fight to certify McCormick's win in this election. You got Governor Josh Shapiro. Remember, he was ghosted in a sense by Kamala Harris. He should have been the vice presidential pick for her if she wanted to win. She didn't choose him. I don't know why. The accusations are it's because he's Jewish is the reason why she may not have chosen him. That being said, Governor Shapiro, he weighed in on this. He condemned the rogue counties. Good for him for undermining trust in Pennsylvania's election integrity. So as you can see there, the recounts continue. The taxpayers there in Pennsylvania, they're footing a $1 million bill for what many see as an entirely preventable standoff. Will the rule of law prevail, or will defiance rewrite the election's outcome? That's the concern here, and that is a question that has not yet been answered. But again, a lot of lawyers and attorneys are on this, and I think that it's going to come out in Dave McCormick's favor. We'll find out. If it doesn't, it's going to be a lot of questions to answer from the Democrats. Okay, President Donald Trump, I want to talk about this, just kind of finish things off. Then we'll take your questions and your comments here. I think it's important to talk about. President Trump has a very unique opportunity to reshape global stability and strengthen America's role in the world. His approach is going to have to start with communist China. And it's been acknowledged by the DNI, the CIA, the FBI, that communist China is the greatest threat facing the United States today. So Donald Trump has promised to hold Beijing accountable, ensuring fair trade practices and encountering their influence in key regions like in Africa and in Latin America. But China is only part of the challenge in global stability. I mean, we got the Middle East that has now become a hotbed. Wars are going on. Israel's stability is at risk right now. So Donald Trump's strategy would really clamp down on Iran. They're the head of the snake here. So using sanctions are going to help. Military strength is going to be needed to neutralize their nuclear ambitions, while supporting at the same time Israel's fight against terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. And he's also set to revisit his groundbreaking dialogue with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, who he was criticized for having a dialogue with. But when he stopped and he was no longer president, Kim Jong-un sees an opportunity and he starts aligning himself with China and Iran and with Russia. And he's garnering strength for an ultimate maybe attack on the United States. So yeah, get Donald Trump back in there and start engaging Kim Jong-un once again and have some tougher agreements put in place to curb their missile programs. Hypersonics are a huge threat from North Korea. So Trump's foreign policy, in the meantime, his vision includes rebalancing these alliances as well. He'll demand that NATO members like Germany meet their defense commitments. That's a necessity here. And he's going to push India, the prime minister there, for fairer trade terms. And he's going to address instability in Latin America by confronting corrupt regimes and these drug cartels who are running roughshod all over the country and around the world. So really, with this blend of tough diplomacy, which he has, and the strategic economic moves, which he's going to do, Donald Trump says his second term will secure peace and prosperity, providing once again that strong leadership that can make the world safer for everyone, not just conservatives, but everyone, and not just Americans, everyone, hopefully, from these threatening countries around the globe. All right, that's the final word here. Let's take some of your comments and some of your questions. Cameron Harris is watching them, so thank you for chiming in, and we'll keep taking them as long as you would like up until we no longer have time. Harry Sakelian is back. Good morning, Tom. I am not optimistic about the media changing their stripes until the media decides it's not about winning, but about reporting. Nothing will change. I hope I am wrong. Thanks, Harry. I hope you're wrong too, and I hope I'm wrong as well because I feel the same as you. I think that the reason why they're reacting the way they are now to Donald Trump is because they're shocked, they're stunned. They have no other options on the table. When we discuss how the media now is starting to engage President-elect Donald Trump. And even politicians are saying, okay, we got to get now on his good side. Okay, no longer, have you heard these people come out now and say that he's still Hitler or that he's a threat to democracy? No, because it wasn't true in the first place. And they were mischaracterizing the man for so many years, and he's demonstrated time and again to the point where I think most Americans see, okay, all of that was disinformation. And by the people who are categorizing Donald Trump's statements as disinformation, that they're the real threat. And it was something I was trying to get across back in 2020, that the real threat to our election and election integrity and the real threat to democracy has now got into the legacy media. And now they're propagating these false narratives and messages and covering for the Democrats. It didn't start with them. I very much agree with my friend Bill Borgell, who's wrote a book under the pen name of J.N. Welch. And he talked about this whole effort from academia about, the book is called, by the way, An American Divorce. And he wrote it and I read it, and he was spot on about how this message to destroy this country started back decades ago. Well, it didn't start there, but that's really where it got amplified through academia and through the universities and the colleges and now K through 12. Misrepresenting the history of this country and buying into this Marxist theory that the United States is fundamentally a bad country and it's a racist country, and it needs to be more like what Karl Marx envisioned, this utopia that will never, by the way, come to fruition in this life, but that's what they would like to see. This little gem in the sky, this ethereal concept that no one will ever attain to because it's not real. It's a fairy tale, it's a fantasy. And what we know objectively by watching it play out over centuries and millennia, the only thing that has really provided people individual liberty is the way the United States of America has decided to govern its people. They decided to govern its people by the people. The people, you and I, are the ones who are governing this country. It's a constitutional republic. And that means we vote people in office, and if they don't do a good job, we get them out of office. But what they've been able to do is to take over our lives, and through these slow-growing but massive bureaucracies that now exist, dictating how you are supposed to live. And so that all needs to be done away with. But that started, it grew in its impact through the universities. And all these journalists nowadays have gone through those universities. They've been taught these concepts. And that's why you're seeing, as Rashini had mentioned, that they use all these adjectives now to describe somebody. So you can say, as she mentioned, great example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When the news media writes an article about him, they'll say, anti-vax Robert F. Kennedy Jr. See, he's not anti-vax, by the way. He's anti-mandated vaccine, and he's very much in support of informed consent and proper studies regarding vaccines, and make sure they're transparent so everybody can have the information that these studies had revealed. That's what he is for. He's not anti-vax. But that's what journalists have been doing now for a number of years. And I can tell you from experience, in newsrooms around the country, you were not allowed to use adjectives and those types of things to describe anybody or anything. There were consequences for that, and there's reasons for it, because you're implanting a notion in your reader or your viewers or your listeners' minds, making them think the way you're secretly wanting them to think about somebody. You're framing the dialogue or the report, and it's a sneaky way of doing it. So you're not allowed to do that, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. The media has become so corrupt. All of this to say, Harry, that I hope that I and you are wrong. I do hope the media comes back. I hope these newsrooms are, in a sense, gutted, and they start hiring real serious journalists who are willing to do the research behind every story they decide to cover, and provide the platform for the dialogue that needs to occur for them even to come to some semblance of what is ultimately the truth here, objectively, and then present that to their audience, and their audience can make their own decisions. We don't need your help, reporters, to decide for ourselves what we believe is true and what is false. And then don't start saying that what we believe is false or is true is disinformation, so you're going to shut us down. It's amazing. These activists in newsrooms need to go away, and they need to start hiring real reporters. So, Harry, thank you for that. It's a huge problem in this country, and it really does affect our daily lives. All right, Cameron, let's bring up another comment here. Maybe it's a question. Steve Damasio, this Pennsylvania issue needs to be settled the way they did in Athens, Tennessee, circa 1948. I don't remember that, Steve. That was a long time ago. So I'd be curious as to what that is. Maybe chime in again. I don't have time to look it up right now. So I'd be curious to see how they handled it. But I can tell you this, what they should not be doing is counting the ballots that the Supreme Court says are invalid ballots. And these clerks in these counties are saying, we don't care, we're doing it anyway, we know it's illegal, but we're going to do it. And maybe, and then we'll, call your bluff, Supreme Court, and maybe, with a little carrot here, draw you back into this debate so you'll rule in our favor. I think they're taking a big risk here. And even Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, says this is wrong what you're doing. Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, saying that these 4 counties in Pennsylvania that are acting this way, demonstrably cheating in this election, if that is indeed what they are doing, and they don't care anymore. And they think that the Pennsylvanians there don't care. Oh, they're seeing what you're doing, and hopefully the media at large is going to make this known, and there will be consequences. Dave McCormick seems to have won this election. He's already claimed victory for this, and Bob Casey needs to bow out and say, yeah, I did not get as many legal votes as McCormick did. Thanks so much. I'm curious about Athens, Tennessee, way back in the 1940s. If you come back up here, we'll bring it back up. All right, let's bring up another one here. Annie, Morning Joe did explain they were told they needed to change course, no matter the reason. I agree that this is the better option to the last 7 years. Proof will be as they react to his presidency. Yeah, Annie, thank you for that. That's another additional tidbit about what had happened here, that they were forced to do it. You cannot look at the past many, many years and say that Morning Joe Scarborough, and Mika Brzezinski, a former CBS journalist, now a far left Donald Trump hater, suddenly show up at Mar-a-Lago and say, let's have a dialogue. We don't agree with everything you say, but we need to start having civil discourse in this country. When they're the ones, amongst many, but they're among the top 2, along with Rachel Maddow and these other people who have just been stoking the strife and division in this country for years. And suddenly, a couple weeks after he wins, they're not even saying my bad. I was going to say, my bad, let's start over. No, they're not even saying my bad. They're saying, we need to start having civil discourse, as if they're telling other people what has always been the way they felt about civil discourse. It's not. So, okay, let's just lay that aside. Hopefully they mean this. I don't think they do. I think, Annie, you're absolutely right. I think that they're just kind of doing what they're told. Their jobs depend on it. And if they want to have a future, successful show, because the viewership is, they're just fleeing MSNBC, because they, I think, now know that for the past many, many years, they have been just spouting disinformation. And I don't know why anybody watches that network at all anymore. When you talk about the doubling and the tripling down of Donald Trump as a Vladimir Putin puppet, he's an asset, he's a spy for Russia. There was zero evidence that that's the case. And Adam Schiff still comes out and says, we had plenty of evidence. Still, the other day, he said that that's the case. No, there wasn't evidence. And any evidence that did exist was manufactured by the Hillary Rodham Clinton presidential campaign. And you know that. So I hope it changes. But like you said, I think it's very disingenuous. I think Donald Trump is the one that's having grace, saying, all right, come back. If we want to talk about media relations, let's see how we can do that better while I am president and you're covering the Oval Office. All right, let's bring up another comment here from Cameron Harris is going to bring in. Hey, Harry's back. Tom, P.S. Do we know Donald Trump's backup picks if Gaetz is not confirmed? Thanks, Harry. No, I don't. I don't know who his backup picks are. I do think he's going to get confirmed. I think that, Matt Gaetz going out and meeting with the Republicans that he has offended. He's got to get every Republican pretty much in the Senate behind him in this. And to be honest with you, I do think if the senators do not come around and vote for him, shame on them, because they've witnessed firsthand the lawfare that Merrick Garland and the others within the Department of Justice and the FBI have been playing for so many years. And not just with politicians, but they've been doing it, obviously, through social media. Elon Musk revealed, if people would pay attention in depth, what the Department of Justice has been doing to steer elections in the Democrats' favor under direct threat and intimidation. When FBI agents show up at your door and start questioning you, it's serious. And there's an intimidating factor there. And how they have gone after these pro-life activists, and you're allowed to be an activist, but they have gone after them and put them in jail and in prison for standing on a sidewalk while they've ignored the dozens and dozens of the fire bombings of these pregnancy resource centers with very few people have ever been arrested for those things. I think maybe 2 or 3 out of hundreds of these attacks, and they don't care. There's clearly a political worldview in terms of who they're going to punish and who they're not. And I'm not even mentioning that Donald Trump, many different cases against him that are just completely frivolous but very serious criminal investigations into Donald Trump by the Department of Justice. So Matt Gaetz needs to be put in, and I certainly hope that the senators realize that this has got to stop. And I'll also say this. I do think, Mike Rogers was the Senate candidate against Alyssa Slotkin in the state of Michigan. He narrowly lost that race. But I do hope that he will step up and that he will be chosen to lead the FBI because he knows that agency very well. He understands the rot that has come in and infiltrated the Federal Bureau of Investigations since, long after he left the FBI as a special agent. So he understands it, and I hope that he's the guy to lead that agency and make it great once again. Okay, let's bring up one more comment. We'll say so long and sayonara. The engineer, what's up, the engineer? Athens, Tennessee ended up being settled at the at the end of a gun barrel. Okay, thanks for the clarification. I was not aware of that. Okay, so maybe it was one of those duel type of things, and I don't know. I'll leave that one alone. The engineer. I'm not gonna. Although I do hope this does not get settled with gun violence. I will make that abundantly clear here. I'm not calling for that, but I get now where the previous commenter was saying. Okay, very much appreciate it. The engineer, is always good to hear from you and see you there as well. Remember, this podcast lives in perpetuity on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook. Very much appreciate you sharing these conversations to your friends and even your enemies. Let's engage everybody in this and have civil discourse once again. All right, until next time, which is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, God bless you. Have a fantastic day.